We know, Christ, that you are the inner teacher, and so we turn within. We pray for peace. Thank you, God. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, we're going to align ourselves with this truth statement. You know why? Why? Because it is true, right? You know why? Because it is true. Okay. So let's align with it, and again, feel free to use whatever movement you want or none that helps you get in the energy flow. So here we go. Let's affirm it together. God's Spirit in me now accomplishes all the desires of my heart. I am patient, for all is unfolding as it should. All right, let's align with it again. God's Spirit in me now accomplishes all the desires of my heart. I am patient, for all is unfolding as it should. Oh, David. Let's affirm it again. Please let me love you, David. Okay, here we go. God's Spirit in me now accomplishes all the desires of my heart. I am patient, for all is unfolding as it should. All right, and if you want to, turn to somebody who you affirm that. God's Spirit in you now accomplishes all the desires of my heart. All right. It turns out David didn't mess up. I did. I turned the microphone off. So, okay. Anyway. All right. Good stuff. Okay. How many of you wake up to an alarm clock? Really? That's all? How do the rest of you wake up? Dog? Dog jumping on your bed? The cat jumping on your face? The light? You have somebody kind that gently shakes you by the shoulder? Okay. How many of you use your phone for your alarm clock? I do too. Yeah, see, now I got more of you. Okay. I love that. And, and I'm sure your phone has many, many ringtones, right? And I put the one that wakes me up, that's that little tinkle sound. But there are others like dun da da da. Does anybody have those the big dun da 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 things on your phone that wakes you up? Janelle does. All right. Yeah, so there are a lot of different ways that we wake up, right? And some of them are gentle, and some of them are the da-da-da stuff that kind of makes you want to leap out of bed. And America got a big alarm clock wake up this weekend, did we not? Yes, we did. What happened in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's easy to want to pretend like it didn't happen, to go like, oh, that's not here. But we can't do that. We can't afford it. You got a snooze button on your clock, right, or on your phone? Well, I think we've used up our snooze buttons on this. We're done. It's time. It's time to really address what surfaced in Charlottesville, Virginia. And what surfaced was some people that really don't know what we know. We just affirmed it today. We affirm it every Sunday. It's up on our big old sign out there. I hope you affirm it on a regular basis. And we know what it is, right? Our God is love. Our race is human, and our religion is oneness. And some people who unfortunately don't know that, who somehow have not come to that place in consciousness, who came to Charlottesville, Virginia to bring to a boil a lot of hate and racism and ugliness and violence. And because of that, a lot of things have happened. Some things have changed. And we've got to pay attention to it. Certainly one thing that happened is that 3 people made their transition this weekend that probably weren't expecting that. On the human level of things, it's a tragedy. Somehow at that deep spiritual level, things are as they are meant to be. But that doesn't give us license to not feel the human emotions, not to address the tragedy of this situation that happened in Charlottesville. Yeah, there are political overtones. Anytime people get together, there's always politics involved. Politics is really just about the management of power. That's what politics are. So, okay, there's some politics in all of the thing. I'm not going to talk about that. Also, where there are people involved, there's also something that's much deeper and much richer than the politics on the surface. And you know what that is. That's the spirituality of it, right? This is a spiritual issue, and that's why we're going to talk about this today. And that's why in just a little bit here we're going to have the opportunity, should you choose to do this, to have an opportunity to come up and write in this salt and release whatever it is that you are ready to release about this circumstance or anything in your life that's preventing you from experiencing peace. Certainly what surfaced in our country is definitely preventing us from experiencing peace in our country. Frankly, it ripples out into the world, and it ripples into our individual lives. What's personal is also universal. There's nothing that can happen on the microcosm that somehow isn't affecting us, or on the macrocosm that somehow is not affecting us on the microcosm. We're affected, whether you want to be or not, whether you wish you could just put the snooze button on and put the pillow over your head and pretend like it didn't happen. It's not an option. Even if you don't want to become conscious about it, it's affecting you, I guarantee you. It's affecting all of us at the level of the unconscious, at the level of energy. We're all in it. We're all in this boat. We're going to talk about boats in just a bit here. We're all in the boat. And so we get to make some choices. We're going to look at what Jesus did and how Jesus made choices about what to do in life when we are feeling tossed around. So when we get the wake-up call, it can come in a lot of different forms. We've all had wake-up calls that aren't just the getting up in the morning kind, right? I know you've all had wake-up calls because otherwise you would not be sitting in a Unity church. I know that. I've had so many wake-up calls, I don't even know if I could ever go to sleep. I'm sure I can go to sleep again. But, wake-up calls can come in the form of diagnoses, medical diagnoses. Wake-up calls can come in the form of what feels like relationship disasters, one way or another. Wake-up calls can come in what feels like job crises or what feels like financial stress. Or wake-up calls can come in the form of violence or war or things that disrupt you. Wake-up calls can come in the form of racism and harm, of exclusion, of ugliness. It can come in so many forms. Again, the opportunity is to choose, how am I going to respond to that? What am I going to do with it? The fact is that it happens. So the opportunity is to decide where I'm going to take that. How am I going to find where Spirit would lead me in this situation? I thought about this last night a lot. I happened to see the news yesterday afternoon. I was appalled. It kind of snuck up on me. I didn't know this was going on. And so I spent a lot of time last afternoon and evening reading the news, processing it, having a lot of feelings about it, and praying and asking, okay, God, my goodness, where are you in this? Where are you in me? Where are you in the midst of this circumstance? What is it that we need to do here as a community? What are you calling us to, God? What are you calling us to be? Who are you calling us to understand ourselves as? And who are you calling us, what are you calling us to do? And so the first thing, when we get a wake-up call or when we get any of those circumstances that invite us, that seem like we have reached the limits of our human understanding, the first thing is to assess what's going on. What are the facts? I wrote about this in the Heart Notes this week, and it's up on the Facebook page, and if you get the Shine the Light, it's in there, that the great prosperity writers, including Catherine Ponder, who co-founded this church with her husband Kelly Ponder back in 1961, as well as the Unity co-founders Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, they wrote wonderful prosperity books, and if you read those books, you'd think they must have been swimming in money. They weren't. If you go back and read those, they were written at the direst times of their lives. Catherine Ponder was living in a one-room apartment provided by her church in Mobile, I think it was Mobile, Alabama, with her little son. Can you imagine living with an 8-year-old in a one-bedroom? Maybe you do, I don't know. And he was rambunctious. He was a pill, as it seems like. And Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were living in the time of a great American financial depression, where they couldn't pay the bills at Unity School, where the sheriff came to repossess the printing press at Unity School, and Charles Fillmore said, "Don't worry, I'll have a rich father." And he meant God. Fortunately, the sheriff didn't get that, and I guess and it worked out, because Charles does have a rich father, as we do. So it worked out. So the point being is that in these situations, they had reached the limits of their human understanding. They were like, I get it, but I don't get it. I don't know what to do. And what they did, though, they didn't give up. They did what we're affirming. They trusted that God is fulfilling the desires of my heart, that God is showing me I'm patient because I'm trusting that all is unfolding as it should. And that's where those books came from, all that great literature that we love in Unity so much. It didn't come out of people's successes. It came out of their failures. That's where it came from, every single word. It came because they couldn't figure it out, because there wasn't anywhere for them else to go except to go to Spirit, to go within. And what a gift, because that's really our source. That's really where we're meant to go. So we take a look at, we look at the facts. The facts are that the racism in this country has been here since the get-go. It was one of the things that the economy of the United States was founded on. That's well documented in every bit of history. This is not a far-out idea. It's obvious, and it's documented clearly everywhere. That's a fact. The problem is that though we have struggled and tried and pushed and pulled and tugged and tried to deal with it, we really haven't ever done it. So it's time. We got a diagnosis. Friends, we got cancer. And that cancer is called racism, and it's called exclusion, and it's called hatefulness and violence, and it's called fear. And we can't live with it anymore. We have the healing presence within us. We have the ability to do something different. And that's what we're called to do. We can't go back to sleep. We can't afford it. And we have every bit of resource, every bit of opportunity to spiritually to live what we affirm every Sunday. Our God is love, our race is human, and our religion is oneness. That's a high aspiration. That's a high aspiration. And we are called to do that. You know, when I was looking at some of the videos that were posted about the incidents, the thing that I saw that was like so sad and heartbreaking to me is the distorted faces of hate. Just distorted. For whatever reason, those people didn't get the message about who they are. I have a person who I consider him a friend. I've never met him, but Scott Shepard, I've talked about him before. He was on my radio program a few months ago, and he puts his Facebook page says, Scott Shepard, Reformed Racist. I love that. And that's what he does. He was high up in the KKK, very high. He knows everybody, all of them. And he doesn't have any illusions about the hate in that organization. And by the grace of God, because he also has the disease of alcoholism, over 20 years ago, I don't remember now, maybe 30 years ago, when he got caught for drunk driving and he chose to go to treatment instead of go to jail, when he started getting sober, he also started getting healed of his racism. And what he told me was, he said, racism is an addiction. I said, really? And we talked about that on my radio program. He said, yeah, it's an addiction. And he talked about what got him into all of that ugly world was his own sense of insecurity, his own sense of not knowing himself, his own sense of self-hate and not knowing himself. And so for that reason, in that place, I can certainly, I have to work at it sometimes, I'll admit it. I can pray for those folks. And I invite you to come to that place too, when you can. Don't pretend like you don't see the outer, because it's ugly and it's harmful. It's deadly. And look deeper within and see that inside there's something that's distorted. There's a spiritual sickness, and it needs help. It needs to be lifted up in prayer. and certainly pray for everybody that's affected. So let's talk about Jesus. This is in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 8, verse 23. I love this. This is one of my favorite stories about the boat and the wind and the waves. Starting with verse 23. And where Jesus had been right before this story, he'd been up on the mountain, and that symbolizes high consciousness. And it says, so he says, when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A boat means that you're getting, again, we're looking at this metaphysically. We're looking at what's the deep spiritual meaning of this. He's getting into a place in consciousness where he's going to launch out into water can represent the unconscious. He's willing to engage with what he doesn't know in himself. You hear that? Are you willing to engage with what you don't know is within yourself? That's scary, isn't it? Are we willing to engage as a country with what we don't know yet about ourselves, but which is starting to stare us in the face so big time? Let's see what he did. So he got to this boat, and he's getting out into the water. And a windstorm arose on the sea, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep. When we venture out into the great unconscious, when we venture out, when we're willing to say, God, heal what needs to be healed, reveal what needs to be revealed, guess what? You know what's going to happen, right? You're going to wake up because there's going to be a windstorm. There's going to be a windstorm. When I went to Ireland, back several months ago, I know you can't see this. You can look at it afterwards if you want to. I found this in the gift shop at the Benedictine Monastery. And what it is, it's a depiction of Saint Brendan. I don't know if you know who Saint Brendan was. He was a great Irish monk who was a great explorer, and they say he discovered this continent from Europe before anybody else did. I don't know if that's true or not. It doesn't make any difference. But the point is, he was a great explorer, and this is a depiction of him and his monks rowing to heaven in a boat. I saw that thing. I said, I have to have it. So I bought it and brought it home, and I keep it on my little altar where I pray every day. And it reminds me that there's so much I don't know. And am I willing to get in the boat with the Christ, with St. Brendan, with the monks, with whoever, with the angels and saints, and venture out into the sea of my own unconsciousness, my own asleepness? Am I willing? Do I have the guts to do that? Some days yes, some days no. How about you? But my friends, I'm telling you, it's the only way. It's the only way to get anywhere, because otherwise we just stay asleep. The Christ is asleep. So what happened in that story here is, of course, the disciples who represent in this story the learning aspects of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that are trying to wake up, that are wanting to learn. They were willing to get in the boat with him and get out in the waves. And they got scared, of course, and so they went and they did the right thing. They woke Jesus up and they said, Lord, save us, we're perishing. That's the thing to do when the winds and the waves are tossing high. The thing to do is to call your Christ, right? Wake up, wake up, wake up. I'm perishing. And does Jesus say, leave me alone, I'm sleeping? No. And he said to them, he said, why are you afraid, you of little faith? And then he got up and he rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a dead calm. And they were amazed, saying, what sort of man is this that even the winds and the sea obey him? That very power, Jesus always symbolizes the Christ in us when we look at it spiritually. That very power is in us. So whatever it is, it's the wind and the waves in you. If it's something that's very personal to you, individual, if it's something that does have to do with the greater experience in our country or world or whatever it is, or again, like I said, they're connected. You can't really disconnect that because we're all part of the whole. But anyway, however it is that it's showing up for you, wake up the Christ. Say, help me. I'm perishing out here. I've reached the limits. And now all that ever means when you feel like you're perishing, it just means I've reached the limits of my human understanding. That's good news. Because then maybe you'll give up, right? Maybe you'll give up and come to something deeper. Come to that place in you that's really real. Come to that place of the Christ. The other scripture that I want to share with you is the one about the mustard seed. This is in Matthew as well, chapter 13, because it's talking about patience. So he's telling them a parable, and he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It's the smallest of all the seeds, but when it's grown, it's the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. That's patience, is trusting that when we do that, when we trust God, when we're willing to say, wake up, help me. I've reached my limits of my human understanding. I need some spiritual understanding here. To trust that it works. It does every time, and every one of us has lots of stories. I challenge you to go home this afternoon and think about your stories, about where it was that you called out and God responded and you found that you had a victorious experience. You're going to find a lot of those stories. So now I'm going to invite us, and I think we can do this in good order. We have an opportunity. It came to me last night. I thought, God, what in the world are we going to do today? We're not going to pretend like Charlottesville didn't happen. That's not an option. So how can we address this in a way that will be uplifting and will wake up that Christ in our consciousness? The Christ is awake. We're not always awake to it. But alert us to that Christ and help us to grow that kingdom of heaven. So this came to me. This is something that we, a little bit like what we do on Ash Wednesday, is to I'll invite you to, we'll start with a brief prayer, and then to come up here, and if you want to, is to write with your finger in this salt, whatever it is that you want to let go of, whatever it is that's scary to you, whatever, and to erase it, and then pick up a piece of paper and take that back with you to your seat, and write on here, so who am I to be? Whatever it is that God's telling you, so what's mine to be? What's mine to do that's going to bring forth the kingdom of heaven? What is it that I'm willing to step out in myself? It may be thinking differently. It may be learning something different. It may be doing something. I don't know. But whatever God says to you, how am I going to express that kingdom of heaven? How am I going to get in that boat with St. Brendan and all those monks and row to heaven? What's mine to do? What's mine to do? So let's take a moment in prayer, and then the ushers will help us, and we'll just come up by rows. You don't have to if you don't want to, but if you want to, I invite you to come and participate. So let's just take a moment. Sweet Spirit, we give thanks for the opportunity to live our highest values, to let that Christ shine through. Thank you for waking us up. Thank you for the diagnosis, and give us now the strength to find the healing, to bring forth the wholeness. Show us what's ours to release and what's ours to do. And so it is, and we give thanks through the power of the living, loving Christ's presence. Amen.
Pray for peace. 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 There's power in the number of us praying here on earth. We're asking for a miracle. Let your voice be the first to pray for peace.
Pray for your mother.
Pray for peace.
Pray for your father.
Pray for peace.
Pray for your children.
Please pray for peace.
And pray for you.
Pray for peace.
Pray for peace.
Pray for peace.
Got to pray for peace.
Pray for peace.
Pray for love.
Please pray for peace.
Pray for peace and love.
Pray for peace. Pray for leaders.
Pray for peace.
Pray for forgiveness.
Pray for peace.
Pray for freedom.
Pray for peace.
Please pray for us.
Pray for peace. Pray for our family.
Pray for peace.
Pray for your brother.
Pray for peace.
Pray for your sister.
Pray for peace.
Please pray for me.
Pray for peace. Pray for wisdom. Pray for peace. Pray for knowledge. Pray for peace. Pray for understanding. Please
Pray for peace.
Pray for the world. Pray for peace.